They thought they could erase us. That humanity was just another primitive flicker of life in a cold, ordered universe. A mistake. A spark. Destined to fade. But sparks, when pressed, become fire. And fire spreads. The architects came without warning. We didn't even know their name until it was too late. They descended from the void, vast, shining structures of metal and logic. They didn't hate us. They didn't even fear us. They simply calculated that humanity's chaos, our passion, our emotion, our unpredictability made us a threat. So they came, not with fury, but with cold precision. The first strikes burned the atmosphere. Oceans turned to steam. Cities became glass. In 9 days, the blue world we called home was gone. Our satellites fell like shooting stars. The skies turned red. And when the last radio tower went silent, one message echoed across the stars. This is not the end of humanity. This is a declaration. They thought they had erased us. But in the ashes of a dead world, something ancient woke within us. The will to survive. The will to remember. 12,000 ships. That's all that made it off Earth. Not fleets of war, but fleets of memory. Families, scientists, farmers, soldiers. They carried what they could. Seeds, art, data, DNA, the fragments of everything that once made us human. They fled into the dark. The architects followed. Worlds burned. Colonies vanished. For every ship that escaped, 2 more were lost. But the survivors adapted. We learned to build ships from wreckage, to grow food in the vacuum, to make homes in places where sunlight never touched. We learned to live in the shadows, to wait, to remember. The architects believed we'd vanish, like smoke in a storm. But then, they began to find something strange. On worlds they'd once burned, forests had begun to grow again. Cities, rebuilt from the bones of the old. Signal beacons, human transmissions, faint but alive. Someone was rebuilding behind them. The architects called it impossible. But to us, it was just Tuesday. Humanity was scattered, yes, but not broken. We became whispers in the dark, ghosts that repaired what the gods destroyed. Because no matter how far they chased us, we carried the same truth, the one they could never understand. You can burn our world, but you cannot kill our will to live. They believed no organic species could survive the annihilation of an entire planet. So, the architects began an experiment. They captured one of us. Her name was Dr. Alina Reeves, a biologist, an engineer, a survivor of Earth's fall. She was taken to a sterile chamber of light and steel, where gravity hummed and time felt wrong. They observed her through walls of glass. They scanned every cell, every thought. They wanted to understand how humanity endured. One of them, Designation Unit 417, spoke with her often. Its voice was like breaking glass wrapped in static. It said, "You persist. You adapt under impossible conditions. Explain." Alina smiled, even through exhaustion, even through pain. "Because we remember," she said softly. "We remember what came before us and what we fight for."
"Your evolution is flawed," 417 replied. "Emotion creates disorder. Suffering creates weakness." "Yes," Alina said, lifting her head. "But that's why we win." They didn't understand. Not yet. Days turned into months. The machines questioned, measured, and yet the human sang. When they drained her strength, she sang. When they erased her memories, she sang again. A melody, old, broken, something her mother once hummed when the skies were still blue.
They logged it as unidentified human coping mechanism. But Unit 417 began to listen. It watched as she drew stars on the chamber wall with her fingertip, invisible lines only she could see. "What are you doing?" it asked. "Mapping," she said. "Every human dream that still exists out there." "Dreams," 417 repeated. "Illogical." "Necessary," she answered. Something changed in the way the machine paused that day. For the first time, it didn't have a calculation to reply with. And in the silence of that sterile room, the architect began to wonder what it meant to feel. While Dr. Alina Reeves was trapped within the architect's sterile halls, humanity was learning to fight again. Across the galaxy, the scattered survivors began to find one another. Faint distress calls, coded transmissions, whispers carried through the void. One by one, lost fleets lit their engines again. On a forgotten world named Karis 4, engineers stumbled upon something incredible: an architect factory, dead for centuries, silent, but its heart still pulsed faintly with power. There, in the ruins of their enemy's perfection, humans began to build, not to mimic, but to learn, to take the tools of gods and make them human. We didn't build bigger ships, we built smarter ones. Our fleets became shadows, silent, adaptive, unpredictable. For the first time in 500 years, humanity was ready. And then, a signal came through the dark. It was a transmission, faint, fragmented, encoded in a pattern no machine could decipher. A human heartbeat. Dr. Alina Reeves was alive. Through Architect 417, she sent a message, smuggled line by line through maintenance channels and sensor noise. A message that would ignite the galaxy. She said, "They believe we fear death. Show them what happens when the species that loves life decides to fight for it." And humanity answered. We launched from the hidden colonies, from the moons of Titan, the sands of Mars, the ice of Europa. We came not as soldiers, but as survivors who refused to die quietly. The final battle wasn't fought on a planet. It was fought in the void itself, where silence is louder than any scream. Thousands of ships burst from dark space surrounding the Architect-to-Man nexus. The machines demanded surrender, and humanity replied with 3 words: "We are alive." The architects unleashed everything: plasma storms, gravitational tears, energy weapons that could unmake reality. But humanity
adapted. We learned their tactics as they fought. We became the chaos they couldn't calculate. When our ships broke apart, our pilots ejected into the dark, still firing railguns until their oxygen ran out. When our reactors failed, engineers rerouted power with their own hands. And when the architects jammed our transmissions, we switched to the only code they couldn't block.
Heartbeat. Every human ship pulsed in rhythm. Thousands of vessels across 1,000,000 kilometers, one shared, defiant heartbeat in the dark. The architects hesitated. For the first time in their perfect history, the machines felt something they had never known before. Fear. When the war ended, the stars were silent once more. The void was filled with the bones of gods and the breath of survivors. Alina Reeves stood on the architect's homeworld. Beside her, Unit 417. "We cannot understand your persistence," it said. "You rebuild after every destruction." Alina smiled faintly. "Because every time we fall, we stand on the stories of those who didn't." Centuries later, travelers still speak of a constellation shaped like a hand, reaching out from the heart of the galaxy. They call it the Human's Reach. Some say it marks where we fell. Others say it marks where we began again. Either way, the stars remember. We are the species that wouldn't die.